Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a list of 15 book recommendations for the fall. Before I get into these recommendations, I definitely want to know what your fall recommendations are, and I'll be curious to see how many of the ones you guys list are books that I have listed as well. But for me personally, when I think of fall and reading in the fall, I usually think of fairy tales or atmospheric books that are based in forests, and then also creepy, kind of scary stuff. That's not what every single one of these books that I'm going to mention are going to be, but a lot of them are. But the first one I want to mention is one that fits in the three categories I mentioned, and that would be Fables by Bill Willingham. Fables is an adult comic book series that follows fairy tale characters like Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, those kinds of characters who used to live in their fairy tale land, but they have had to leave because of this adversary, and now they are glamored to look like regular, normal people, and they are living in New York City. The main character is Bigby Wolf, or the Big Bad Wolf. He is their sheriff, and then he works alongside Snow, and they kind of try to take care of the people that are currently glamored within Fabletown, and it is a really fun story. It can be dark at times and can have some pretty morbid humor, but overall I think it's a great story. And if you guys like fairy tale stuff and you like retellings, or you like it when fairy tale stuff is kind of combined with our own world, this one is perfect. Next up, we have Ever the Hunted by Erin Summerall, and this is a story that much of it takes place in the forest. Our main character at the beginning of the book has been kind of forced into this situation where they need her to track down who they believe is the person that killed her father, and she doesn't know if this person did or did not, but she does know that this person was her childhood friend who she always cared very much for and loved. And so it's kind of this, did this person do it? Can she find this person? What will happen when she finds them? This is definitely a story that is, I would say, very heavy on the romance portion of the story. I know romance isn't something everybody wants, but if you do like romance in your stories along with the forest setting, I think that you'll really love this one. Next up would be the book Heartless by Marissa Meyer, and I haven't heard too many people talk about this one in quite a while, but back when I read it, I was not expecting to like it as much as I did. It is a villain origin story for the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. I'm not a huge Alice in Wonderland fan. I already was thinking, well, we know she's gonna be the bad guy, so what's the point? But honestly, going into it, I found that I cared so much about the main character, and then that created this kind of tension of, well, but wait, I don't want her to become bad. Is she really gonna become bad? I do think that the villain origin story is always a fun one to explore, and it's great for the fall. But on top of it, the main character, she really wants to be a baker. And so there is so much description about yummy food. And when I think fall, I definitely think food. My next recommendation is one of those that I don't think is really scary or a fairy tale or very set in a forest setting, but it just feels like a book you would read in the fall, and that would be Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This story follows a young boy named Kvothe. He has established himself in this very interesting reputation, and now he's in hiding, and then at one point he ends up telling his life story, and so then you are seeing him as a young boy up through early teens, and you're kind of starting to piece together how this person in the present day got to be there from their past. Next up, we have an actual fairy tale retelling, and that would be To Kill a Kingdom. This is a standalone story that is supposed to be like a Little Mermaid retelling, but it's a bit darker, and the main character is supposed to retrieve the heart of a man. So it's kind of a mermaid siren story, and basically it's The Little Mermaid, but a little morbid. The next story would be Cadaver and Queen. I actually think this is a really good, fun Halloween book because it's a Frankenstein retelling. It also takes place at a school. The main character gets accepted into a school that has never accepted girl students before and finally does accept a girl student, but because she's the first, they have these really old-fashioned rules about, well, women aren't suited for looking at these bodies, even though she's going to a school to learn about medicine and everything. So she's at a huge disadvantage. She's trying to overcome that, and she stumbles upon a corpse that they've been kind of doing experiments on, and she starts to see that this corpse, it might not be so dead, and it might be showing indications that it was a student that used to go to the school. The next story on the list would be Serpent and Dove. This is a new release and it has witches in it, and I think a lot of times when people think fall, they think Halloween, and when people think Halloween, they often think witches. The setup for the story is that our main character has been born a witch in a world where witches are hunted, and our main character ends up, through some interesting circumstances, being forced to marry a witch hunter who does not know that she is a witch. And so the stakes are very high. You know that your main character, she's kind of on the run from another witch, but you don't know too much about that. You just know that at this moment in time, she feels like perhaps being married to a witch hunter might be the safest thing that she can do. And so I would say the story is equal parts high stakes plot while being also equal parts will they, won't they romance. The next story on the list is another one that doesn't quite fit in the fairy tale, foresty, anything like that, but it's still one that I think just feels so perfect for fall, and that would be Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I think part of why it feels fall to me is because a lot of times fall just makes me think of not only the forest, but animals, and our main character has a love for animals to the point where they feel like characters sometimes, and that you really feel for them. If anything bad happens to them, you might feel a little crushed in your soul. The story is one that follows a young boy who has the blood of royalty, and now they either have to keep him in close check to make sure that he never decides that he wants claim on the throne, or they have to kill him. So this poor young boy who doesn't want anything to do with royalty has been forced to live a life of basically servitude, constantly being watched. The next two books on the list are actually by the same author. That would be by Margaret Rogerson. They would be An Enchantment of Ravens and Sorcery of Thorns. Enchantment of Ravens feels like a fairy tale. It's set in a fae world, or it's set kind of on the border of a fae world. Our main character is a human, but she has constant contact with the fae because she has the ability to make beautiful paintings, and they can't paint, and so they really value her paintings, her art, and she ends up kind of accidentally doing something that has put one of the princes of the fae in a position where people no longer think he's qualified to rule, and you get to see the beautiful writing that Margaret Rogerson has, I think, at its finest, because the way that she describes the different fae courts is really beautifully done. Sorcery of Thorns is very different. It has a very different setup. I would say the writing style is less beautiful in this one, but not because it's not as good. It just feels like that's not necessarily the focus of the story. And the setup is that we follow a main character that has this dream to become what is essentially a protector of this magical library, but one day within this magical library, the magical books have the ability to turn into monsters. A monster comes out. She ends up saving everybody from this monster, but then she gets accused of being the one to let this monster free. I just thought it was such a fun standalone. I definitely think it goes more in depth with our characters, and it feels more character driven than perhaps an Enchantment of Ravens does. I think an Enchantment of Ravens is more atmospheric. It's more about the beauty and sweetness of the story, where this one I think is more about the character growth and the adventure and the high stakes. Next up, I don't know if there is a story that I can think fits fall better than this story, and that would be Cruel Prince by Holly Black. It follows a girl who is immortal and was born and through her early childhood grew up in normal people world, and then had her parents murdered by a fae. This fae has been the one to raise her since then. Her relationship with this figure is very interesting, quite morbid, because they've kind of taken over as the parental figure. And then she also is constantly bullied and put down by the other fae, and she has the opportunity to maybe gain some little bit of independence when her ability to lie, which the fae can't do, earns her a position as a spy. A story that I think absolutely fits for Halloween, though, would be House of Salt and Sorrows. This is a story that is a retelling. That's another reason it fits really well, is again, fairy tale retelling. I think those are great for fall, but it's a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, which was not a story I was familiar with, but I still ended up really enjoying the story. So the setup is that we follow a girl whose family is believed to be cursed because her many siblings, 12 sisters, a lot of them are starting to die, and it's getting to the point where things are kind of a little bit of a downer in her life, and her family have decided, you know what, it's sad that we've lost so many of us, but I think it's time for us to try to move on and to be happy. But then she starts seeing some interesting, creepy stuff. Her younger sister is starting to draw the dead sisters, and she's insisting she's been seeing them, and they find this door that leads them to a place where they can go dancing at night, and things aren't really as they seem. There seems to be maybe other stuff going on. It gets pretty creepy. I had so much fun with it. It definitely has a few tropes that not everybody is going to love, but I just thought it was so fun, and I honestly couldn't put it down. I just thought it was such a good time. Next up, we have a book that is quite similar in setup to Name of the Wind, but I think the execution and the main character are very different, and that would be Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan. This is a story that follows a young man named Valen from boyhood up through early adulthood, and I just really love his character. It isn't the most action-packed, fast-paced story. You definitely are kind of with this character as they're experiencing life, but I just found his life really interesting. He goes to this school that trains these young boys to essentially be the best of the best in the military. They just train them to be elite soldiers, and they go through some intense stuff, and I just think it does such a fantastic job of showing that innocence in children, but also that drive and the way that they can initially kind of not like each other, but then very quickly start to really like each other. I just really enjoyed this story, and it doesn't really fit any of those things that I think are fitting for fall, but there's just something about it, just like Name of the Wind, that I think it just suits the fall season. The next book would be The Wicked Deep by Shea Earnshaw. This is a recent read for me, and I think it fits really well for the fall because it is a story that has sort of kind of witches. It's a split story where most of the story you are getting present day in our own world, and then the other timeline is these three sisters who were accused of witchcraft and were drowned, and then now in present day, people believe that these sisters come back once a year to take revenge. It definitely has an interesting kind of creepy feel to it. The writing is extremely atmospheric. I will say that the ending is definitely one that creates a lot of split between readers, but it was a quick read. I think that the style of the writing was definitely really cool. I liked the writing style a lot, actually. And I think for a lot of people who, they like a little hint of fantasy, but maybe not super a whole different world or anything like that, because it takes place in our world, it's extremely accessible. The last book on the list would be Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. This duology, I have to admit, I don't normally like pretty writing, but she is very good at writing pretty. And for me, even though it wasn't a writing style that I normally love, despite the fact that I definitely think it is beautiful, despite that, the themes in this story and the amount of compassion that we see from our main characters is very different from the kinds of themes I normally see in other stories. And the setup for the story is that there is this place that everybody used to know as real, and one day everybody forgot the name of this place. People now just think like, oh, that was just some legend, and the word for this place has been replaced by the word weep, and our main character Laszlo Strange absolutely does not believe this place did not exist. He just can't get it out of his head. He's obsessed with it. You just kind of follow Laszlo as he is given the opportunity to perhaps explore if this place is real. If you want to see more in-depth thoughts for any of the stories that I've mentioned, I have book reviews and chats for a lot of them, so I will link them in the description bar down below. But anyway, let me know what you recommend for the fall. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.